Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Studio today. And we are going to be talking about a subject that is very near and dear to our hearts and a passion of ours and something we do a lot at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, and that is help women with weight loss. So as you know, we specialize in compounding hormones at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, but we also talk about the importance of strength training, the importance of diet. All those things are a piece of the puzzle. And today we have the special occasion of having Alanna on our show today, and she is going to talk about a little bit about her. She's a type 1 diabetic, and she helps Kathy Cote, who has been on our podcast before, to help. She's kind of Kathy's assistant, and she helps women lose weight in menopause by strength training and she's certified health. Kathy's a certified health coach, and she promotes strength training and diet and things like that. So without further ado, Alanna, welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about a background of yours and how being a type 1 diabetic. Go ahead and change that. There you go. No, change to the other one, Alanna or Yahada. No, there we go. That works. So tell us how your background about being a type 1 diabetic. Tell us about that and when you were diagnosed and how that has basically made you change your diet and lifestyle. I'm assuming it has. So tell us about that.
So I became a type 1 diabetic when I was almost 9. My dad was also a type 1 diabetic. And it was very hard and also very I was like, yay, I get to be like my dad. But I also didn't fully understand all the stuff that needed to be put into it. So it was a good 2 weeks in the hospital until my mom could learn everything. And then it was really trial and error. So usually when somebody is first diagnosed, they have a honeymoon stage. And this stage is where the body is still producing insulin, but not enough to cover everything. And they never know when it's going to start working or stop working. So I think for probably the first 4 or 5 years, I was in a honeymoon stage of constantly adjusting and seeing where things needed to be. It was a lot of food logging and keeping track of everything. Back when I was diagnosed, it was very adamant for someone to stay in the same carb range consistently every day so they could see the differences in blood sugars and what the insulin was doing. But then you also have a kid being a kid and wanting to run around and be normal.
Right.
I would say in my teen years, it was more difficult because I wasn't comfortable with my diagnosis. It was kind of embarrassing, especially when you bring out a syringe and insulin and kids are like, what are you doing?
Right.
So I would say it was definitely more rough in my teens, and I didn't take care of myself as well as I should have. I knew what to do, but fitting in was more important at the time. I think at that point, my highest A1C was probably in the 8s. And normal range is obviously 6.4 or lower. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I graduated high school and wanted to be out in the world that I just wanted more. And what I was doing was not working. So my doctors at the time were not very kind, and I pretty much always felt like I was getting yelled at every time I went. And I decided I finally wanted to try an insulin pump. Um, when I was first diagnosed, they were just starting the process of like putting insulin pumps out there, and all the horror stories I had heard. I was like, no, I'll just keep taking injections. I don't need something to accidentally give me like a whole vial of insulin. Um, and so my doctor was like, we're not putting you on a pump until you can show us that you can keep your blood sugars in control. So for 3 months, I checked my blood sugar multiple times a day. I made sure that I was covering everything that I needed to, and my A1C got to where the threshold that they wanted, which was 7. Um, and I think I surprised him more than anything. He was like, "What did you do in the last 3 months to get your A1C this low that quickly?" And I was like, "I want this," and I did everything that I've been taught to do. I checked my blood sugar, I ate and covered my food with my insulin, and made sure that I kept a close eye on it. So I've pretty much been on an insulin pump ever since. It's been, I'm gonna age myself. It's been like 15 years for me being on an insulin pump, and I really enjoy not having to do all of the math all the time because it's a lot of math.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. I have a nephew who's a type 1 diabetic, and I remember when he was first newly diagnosed, it was calculating carbs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
calculate carbs, you have to calculate how like sensitive you are to the insulin,
Yeah.
depending on where your blood sugar is. Do you decrease a certain amount or increase a certain amount? So yeah, there's a lot of calculations that go into it that pumps nowadays make a difference.
Well,
Um,
I'm assuming this because you're type 1 diabetic and you're familiar with what food does to people's blood sugars, at least yours personally. I'm assuming that that's one of the reasons that you may have transitioned into helping, be Kathy's assistant. I'm sure it's helped to know some of the things about diet and how insulin response. Because even if we're not a diabetic, we still have to worry about carbs and insulin response. Although it's just that diabetics are more sensitive that way. So, you have any comments on that? About is that kind of what had you go into the field that you're in?
yeah, so I've always been interested in scientific side of things. I in college wanted to be a nurse and decided that I wanted a family a little bit more, so I didn't pursue that. But I did get my allied health certificate, um, and took all the heart classes. And one of the nutrition classes that I had to take was actually really intriguing. Learning more about our food and what we've done to mess it up along the way. um, and yeah, I have just always been intrigued in that kind of stuff. And probably in 2019, I started focusing a little bit more on diet and exercise. Um, and Kathy is actually married to my cousin.
Ah,
and,
okay.
and so
There's a
we're
connection.
we're we're related. But that's not why she hired me. I've probably spoken to them a handful of times in my life. um, and it just so happened that when I was there, gosh, 2 years ago now, for my aunt's 80th birthday party, I stayed with them, and me and Kathy got chatting, and whatever I said to her stuck with her, and she called me up last February and asked me if I wanted to work for her.
Awesome. So you've been doing it a year now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a little over a year now.
Awesome. So Janet, what questions do you have for Alanna?
Well, I just want to make a little statement here first, because we're assuming all the listeners know the difference between a type 1 and a type 2. So in Alanna's case, her body's not making insulin anymore, right? It does very little. And a lot of times we don't know exactly why. It could be genetic, it could be inflammation of some sort, but it's very different than type 2, even though there are similarities. So can you kind of give us some differences? Because I think sometimes we need to separate those, because people want to lump them together and they're really different.
They are really different. Yeah, so it is a theory, and a very good one from all of the type 1s that I've also talked to, is that there is a stressor on the body that happens to make somebody a type 1 diabetic. For me, I had strep throat 11 times. And after that, my body was like, okay, we're going to attack itself.
Right.
And for type 2 diabetics, it's more insulin resistance than not making insulin. So instead of the body being able to utilize the insulin that it has, it doesn't know what to do with it. So it just doesn't use it the way that it should. It doesn't accept the amount that it's being given. And the major difference is that just getting more exercise really helps insulin resistance.
Right.
And moving your body. A lot of people end up doing low carb for that reason. I've done low carb, and it really doesn't make that much of a difference to me. Honestly, I didn't like low carb because I didn't have as much energy. And I just didn't ever feel fully satisfied with what I was doing. It did make my blood sugars like easier to control. But yeah, type 2s definitely have it a little rougher, in the sense that they really got to work hard to get their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I would argue that I think type 1s have it harder, because your disease, Alanna, is not reversible.
Right.
You're not going to match.
It's not reversible.
Right.
But I'm not going to have nearly as many complications as somebody.
But the good news is with type 2 diabetics is they can reverse it. And one of the ways to reverse type 2 diabetes is just don't eat carbohydrates, because it's totally different with insulin levels. One has high insulin, one has no insulin, and really, but they both have high glucose. And one of the ways to lower your glucose, if you're type 2 diabetic, is just don't eat carbs. I think that would be better than having to inject insulin all day long and having to monitor your glucose. If you just change your diet and you say exercise, they can reverse their type 2 diabetes.
Correct. But we still have the same issue, in the sense that our livers still do their job and give us that extra sugar spike.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities. I've always felt like, yes, the type 1 diabetic seems to have it more rough, but the complications that come along with a type 2 diabetic are so much greater if you don't take care of it. I mean, they're pretty significant for us too.
Yeah, right.
As a person that takes care of herself, like, I know I'm not gonna like lose my foot because
right.
But you're forced to really early, because you can't produce the insulin. So your consequences were felt very suddenly and early on. Where I feel like a type 2, it's a very gradual thing over their life. By the time they're diagnosed, their activity and their habits have already formed, and that problem wasn't diagnosed for a very long time. So you were forced into that corner and you had to address it much earlier. So the damage, I think, can be, on a different scale, but certainly I agree with you. There's similarities on how you have to approach and the outcomes of the consequences, blindness, losing limbs, things like that are still there because it's too much sugar floating in the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing they have in common is that they have too much sugar floating in the body, but how it manifests itself is different.
Right.
So, Alanna, tell us how this has helped you to help women in menopause lose weight. I'm sure it has, because we already talked a little bit about, how important diet is.
Yeah, so I'm more behind the scenes. I do a lot of the Facebook posts, and I chat with some of the ladies and everything. As for my experience, diet, nutrition is definitely key to a lot of people's issues, especially with weight loss. I've seen it myself. I watched myself fluctuate over the years, and I could never figure out like why I would gain and then why I would lose. And it's been really educational to see Kathy's side of things, the way she coaches, how she became a coach, and all the stuff that she has learned along the way. I've definitely started utilizing that more in my life because just like many women out there, we all get stuck in the diet culture jargon that's just constantly like, don't do this, and work out more, eat less, make sure that you stop eating by 8 p.m., like all of the tips that people think that work, and it turns out that's not the case at all.
Well, and the good thing is that there's a lot of information out there and it's pretty easily accessible, but it can be overwhelming.
Right.
And one thing Janet and I talk about all the time is there's a lot of different things. Low carb works for some people. Keto or intermittent fasting works for some people. You got to find out what works for an individual. They got to find out what works for them. And as healthcare professionals, we can give them tools to help them, but ultimately they have to find out what works best for them.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, for all the women that I've chatted to that have tried diet after diet and just keep trying, they haven't had that light bulb turn on yet, that they just need to pick one that they really enjoy and stick to it.
Yeah,
right.
What can they stick with? That's the important part.
Yeah, because you can't starve yourself forever and exercise and never eat, because you have to have that balance too, or you can't be doing something that you absolutely hate for the rest of your life. That's hard too.
Right.
So tell us about Kathy really stresses. Let's go ahead and stream. Yeah, let's go and stream Kathy's Facebook. Tell us a little bit about Catalyst Fitness. I'm going to just put in there. Kathy stresses a lot about strength training for women. Can you tell us a little bit about Catalyst Fitness and nutrition and about Kathy?
Yeah, so Kathy has been into fitness like since I've known her. But within the past 5 years, I mean, we watched her transform into a body that, we never thought was possible at 50.
Yeah.
And it was truly an amazing process. And now, since she has found something that worked for her that she didn't think was possible, she is started Catalyst Fitness and Nutrition to help others do the same. So she wants to utilize what she's learned and help other women feel better about themselves, not have such a horrible relationship with food, and feel good in their body again.
And tell us how she stresses. She used to be she used to ride an indoor bike a lot, I believe. She's an instructor. Is that correct?
She used to do a spin class instruction.
Yeah. Right.
She used to have her own gym. And right before COVID, she ended up ditching all that and got a coach. Like,
and the
she couldn't figure out. Huh?
Well, the game changer for her was strength training, right? Correct?
Yeah, strength training for sure. She always did a lot of cardio. I mean, I've done a lot of cardio. Most of the women I chat with do a lot of cardio. And although cardio is important for your heart, it's not the only thing that you should be doing, because how else are you going to maintain the muscle that you already have? And when women get to 40 and their hormones start to change, everyone used to always say, oh, getting old, like that's part of getting old. You lose your muscle, you lose your muscle tone, like it's all gone. And that's just the way it is. And it's not. We just never learned that we needed to keep up with it. And to maintain something, you have to actually strength train to maintain that muscle.
Well, I think that's one thing that we forget. And I mean, inevitably, we can't stop the aging process, but there are things we can do to slow it down, at least perception-wise. And I will say, over the last 20 years, and it's partly because I'm getting older, it seems like the bar of old is different. It was 40, then it was 50, 60, 70. I mean, we have 70-year-old patients that are, they exercise routinely, they look great, they have muscle mass, they don't look like your typical 70-year-old would look, but they take care of themselves. And one of the things you have to do that is to strength train. Sarcopenia and losing lean body mass is a real thing. And for women especially, as we age, as they age, it gets a lot tougher. So build as much muscle mass as you can early on so you can maintain it.
Right. And I also think one other thing that we aren't talking about, but it's an advantage of doing the muscle training, is our bones need to have that weight bearing part too. And when I think by the time we're 30, we have the most bone we're ever going to have, and then we start going on a decline. So osteoporosis is huge there. So even if you're afraid about having muscles, you ladies really need to make sure your bones are healthy too. And the only way you can do that is by using weights, because you have to have resistance in order for those bones to be rebuilding and be strong.
Not the only way, but most cardio, spin bike will not build your bones. Running will.
You're not going to get it by certain exercises.
Right.
So weight bearing things must happen in order, because they're not static. They change over time. We replace and, we rebuild. And if we're not putting stress on it, it's not going to happen the way we need it to happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. No, osteoporosis is a big one. It comes up a lot in conversation when I'm talking to ladies in the group, and you don't realize it until it's in your face. And all of the things that you should have been doing, they were like, why weren't you doing them? And well, no one told me.
Right.
And we can't talk about osteoporosis without talking about the importance of hormones. There's a lot of osteoporosis drugs out there, and every single one is indicated for postmenopausal women. Well, what do postmenopausal women lack? They lack hormones. So it's important to make your hormones in balance so you can have strong bones and do strength training. So Alanna, go ahead, Alanna.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So as we wind this podcast up, what do you have a passion for?
Honestly, my passion is for nutrition, and that's always been like a big focus in my life. Both my parents have passed. I am only 35, and I'm an only child.
Wow.
So I definitely think nutrition is high up there to having a long life. And I definitely don't want to die as young as my parents did, because they didn't take care of their bodies the way they should have. And nutrition is key. We get all the nutrients that we need are in foods, and we don't utilize it nearly enough, or even have, like, do you ever see a commercial for broccoli? Or
Right,
that's like
yeah.
not
Right, no.
the Jolly Green Giant. Like, if they had commercials out there about what foods were doing for your body, people would be eating way different than a box of mac and cheese.
Yeah, or worse than that even. I mean, honestly, that's mac and cheese could be good compared to some of the stuff that's out there. So yeah, it's important that obviously nutrition is very important, and you know, being a type 1 diabetic, you obviously know that how food affects your blood sugar. So what is the best? We're going to go ahead and stream Kathy's Facebook page. What is another way to get a hold of Kathy if we have any questions for her?
Messenger, Instagram.
Okay.
She also has a
How did you
TikTok.
stream
Who
the last
knows?
one we were streaming?
There we go.
There we go, right there. So tell us about this. So she can she'll take messages on there.
Yep. You can hit the blue button that says message, and that'll bring you to either me or Kathy. You'll get one of us. And we can chat about what we can do to help guide you into a better lifestyle and make you feel like you did when you were 20 or 30.
Absolutely.
Feeling good in your body and having more energy and balancing the hormones naturally.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I follow that Facebook group, and I see a lot of women that are new there that are, you know, saying the same thing. You know, since I've turned 45, I'm in menopause. I can't lose weight. I'm not changing my diet, and I'm not doing anything different. I just can't lose my belly fat. And a lot of comments like that. And join Kathy's group. She can help you. She struggled with it herself, and she's overcame that. So she knows personally how to overcome those things. So, Alanna, thank you for being on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for helping Kathy and inspiring women and helping women, achieve their goals. We really appreciate that. That's what Janet and our goal is, to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. And I think we've realized that goal today on the podcast. So you've helped us. So thank you so much, Alanna.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in today to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. We're going to have Dr. Renata Moon back on our podcast. We're going to be discussing medical education and how it's kind of been hijacked a little bit. So you don't want to miss out on that one. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you for tuning in today.